Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&As, so let's go ahead and get this started. Alright, first question. I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on progressive range of motion as the old-time strongmen like Paul Anderson, Bob Peoples, and later people like Bud Jeffires, Greg Nuckols, George Leeman, and others used to work on their sticking points on the squat bench and the deadlift? Alright. People need to understand when we start talking about sticking points, I do understand the progressive range of motion thing they're using. We need to get into that, but people need to understand this is supplemental work. It should never, ever, ever replace your full range of motion or your pause work. All right, absolutely not. You still need to do pause squats from the bottom. You need to do pause bench on your chest. You need to do resetting your deadlifts and pulling them off the floor. In fact, even deficit work helps with people a lot. There are a lot of people, though, who disagree completely with sticking points, who coach some very, very top-level lifters and who themselves are top-level lifters. So you need to keep that in mind. There are people who completely disagree with sticking point training. Now, the idea, let's take someone like, what was the first guy? Paul Anderson. Yeah, Paul Anderson. And George Gremick. What a lot of these guys used to do for their what people are thinking of as progressive, they continue to do their normal work. But what they would do, they would take a weight that was heavier than their 1 rep max. All right, and they would train it off pins or blocks or chains in their backyard so that they could set the range of motion to where they would maybe do half reps with a weight heavier than their 1 rep max. And they would progressively over weeks and months lower the bottom of the exercise so that they get stronger and stronger on the way down. And that's progressive range of motion using weights heavier than your 1 rep max so that you can train the sticking points that way. And their idea would be that, well, overhead press or bench or deadlift or whatever, is that if they were to lift that exercise from a half rep with a heavier than their max and then bring it down over time, they would eventually be able to lift more than their max through the full range of motion. But again, people need to understand when it comes down to joint angle specificity, if you purely train that way and you do not train the full range of motion, you are going to get weaker out of the bottom. All right, you are going to struggle when you try to add that progression to the range of motion. You're going to have problems. The only way this sort of training is particularly successful is when you are doing actual pause work also from the bottom of the range of motion as well. And the two can complement each other, but you need to understand this progressive range of motion is absolutely not a replacement for full range of motion work or exploding out of the bottom of these exercises as well. It is not a replacement, and that cannot be stressed enough. All right, next question. Jason, what do you think of high rep power clean work? Common knowledge says Olympic lifts and their variants should be done at maximum of 3 reps. My reasoning is if a garbage man or lumberjack can pick up things all day for reps from the ground so many times over his head, why can't a lifter whose goals are now hypertrophy oriented? Thanks as always, and keep up the good content. The reason it's silly is because these exercises are there not just for hypertrophy, but for speed and power and technique. All right, so if you're doing power cleans, you can't perform a fast power clean more than about 3 reps. All right, you can't do it. You can do overhead work for hypertrophy and strength, stamina, and everything else. So I would say it's silly to be doing this high rep power clean work because you increase your chances of injury through ingraining bad technique and form breakdown. Because when you do finally go heavy on the exercise, you're going to have ingrained bad techniques. You're going to have ingrained techniques that don't train explosiveness. It's really a problem. If your goal was purely hypertrophy, why would you take these technical explosive lifts that have multiple movement patterns involved? All right, the power clean involves different muscles being used and taking over through different parts of the exercise. That's not necessarily ideal for someone chasing hypertrophy through metabolic fatigue through doing high reps. All right, even if you wanted to do a lot of reps on the power clean, I would still recommend you do something like 10 sets of 3, not doing 8, 10, 15 reps with it. It's stupid, it's silly, and it's completely inefficient. It's not the way the exercise works ideally, and you're going to ingrain bad motor patterns. What I would suggest to people is, why don't you just work on barbell rows? to work a lot of the same movements, variations of the barbell row, variations of the deadlift for high reps to simulate what you would want out of the power clean. Same thing with these overhead exercises. Okay, if you want to do higher reps, do some strict presses. And if you want to add a power clean component to it, all right, if you're going to do higher reps on the overhead press, there's no reason to do it out of a rack. If it's a weight you can power clean up, then power clean it up for every rep. In fact, that's what I do these days. That's exactly how I train. I train almost all of my barbell movements off the floor. All right, doesn't matter what they are. I clean them in the position because I do a lot of overhead work these days. Doesn't matter whether I'm doing a push press, doesn't matter whether I'm doing front presses or behind the neck presses. I power clean it up. In fact, that's a biggest part of my training right now. Probably 40% of my lifting right now is overhead work of some type. I power clean it all up. It gives you extra explosive work on your power cleans there for singles, so that you can work on speed and power. But let the other stuff do your metabolic fatigue. You don't need to try to use complex explosive lifts to do that. It's inefficient and the wrong way to do these exercises. All right, next question. Jason, I've been following your novice program after doing clueless routines for a year. Results have been great, but the problem is that the least weight at my gym is 2.5 kilograms. So I have to add 5 kilograms as increments. It's hard to progress in military presses like this. So once I maxed out with 5x5 with 50 kilos, I did 55 or 5x5. Is it okay? I will go back to 55 strict once I push press easier and progress similarly for further increments. You know what, that's actually not a bad technique. I'm going to give you an alternative technique, but yeah, when you increase weight on the overhead press, if you know you've increased it significantly, you could do push presses for the strict to replace the strict press as a form of periodization. That's a great way to periodize stuff even in 3-week blocks, so that you increase the weight and then do push presses and then switch over to the strict press to work on it after you developed a strength base with a new weight with a push press. Not a bad technique. What I would also recommend, okay, go buy your own smaller plates, take them with you to the gym, or even get little 1-pound magnets. You should be able to find 0.5 kilogram magnets, like speaker magnets, and you can stick those to the plates on the ends to go ahead and add weight yourself and just bring those with you. And if not, you can go online and order little micro plates that you can bring with you to the gym. So that's your other solution. But what you're doing to deal with it in the meantime, I actually like that. I like that a lot. All right, next question. You've been talking a lot recently about obesity, diabetes, cancer, and the relationship between these and fructose. What can Western culture and society do to reduce this issue? Government commercials running as often as big corporation and commercials advertising healthy eating products and products which produce gradual increases in exercise. You know what I think government can do about it? Government should probably stay out of it for the most part. I'm not a big government person. And you want the proof of the problem? Why are Americans consuming more fructose right now? Because government interfered in the economy. We didn't let capitalism work in farming, and the government subsidizes corn production. Now, my family were corn farmers and ranchers, my dad's family, so I have actually been on a corn farm. I've done some work on a corn farm, along with free-range cattle ranching, because, again, my dad has a massive family, and this is how they survived. This is what they did growing up. The farm and the ranch stayed in the family. So I'm cool with that in a way because my family benefited, I suppose, but by that same token, by government subsidizing corn, we have so much excess corn that it made it really, really cheap to produce high fructose corn syrup. And now it's in everything, and it's cheap because it was paid for by the taxpayer already. Your tax dollars in the United States created all this high fructose corn syrup with the government subsidizing corn farms. This is the problem. Government needs to quit subsidizing foods that can be made into cheap, easy junk food. There's part of your problem. Quit using tax dollars to subsidize stuff like that. That's also the reason we're now trying to put ethanol in all the fuel, and we do because we have all this surplus corn. But, if we would have just let the farming market and agricultural market take its course instead of tons and tons of subsidization into corn, we wouldn't have this problem. I think the only place government has a place in this is something that we already have agreed to, and that's public schools. Education in schools. That's where it starts. If you don't start with people when they're young, developing good eating habits and learning about nutrition, maybe in school and in class, then you're not going to get anywhere with it. But you're ultimately also going to have a bunch of idiots when you do that who are going to jump up and say they should be teaching people ketogenic diets, because you have all these people who think that the science actually backs that when it doesn't, or paleo diets or whatever. So you are going to have to deal with a lot of bullshit if we start teaching more of this in school. So that's going to make it more complicated. So I don't know what the real solution here is, other than just educating children on proper nutrition at a young age in school. But as far as government actually taking an active role outside of that, no, government created the problem that we have to begin with the high fructose corn syrup. They're the ones who are responsible for that. They increased the fructose load available to the population with subsidizing the corn industry. We don't need more government to fix the problem they created. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.